Next tonight, here to the stunning death in Hollywood. A young actor, a rising star, known for his work on Star Trek. He was killed trapped between his SUV and his driveway gate, and it turns out his Jeep is one of hundreds of thousands included in a recall. Here's ABC's Matt Gutman.
On June 19, 2016, Los Angeles was still wrapped in the muted silence of early morning when the kind of tragedy that feels scripted by fate unfolded in a quiet Studio City neighborhood. A young actor, known for the gentle tremor in his voice and the fragile intensity in his eyes, stepped outside his home to check a gate that had creaked slightly out of alignment the night before. His Jeep Grand Cherokee sat idling behind him on the steep incline of his driveway, the cool air carrying the faint scent of engine heat and eucalyptus leaves drifting from the hill above. In an instant, without warning, without sound, the vehicle rolled backward. The surveillance cameras would later show only the blur of movement, the violent shift of 2 tons of machinery, and the silence that followed. By the time friends arrived for a rehearsal he was supposed to lead that morning, the world had already changed. The life of Anton Yelchin had been pressed out of existence by the ordinary, indifferent weight of his own car. He was 27 years old. The story of Anton Viktorovich Yelchin doesn't begin in Hollywood, nor in the warm promise of California dreams, but in the frozen tension of the Soviet Union, where he was born on March 11, 1989. His parents, Irina and Viktor, were a pair of figure skaters celebrated across Russia, their elegance recognized, but their freedom restricted. Their son came into a world sharpened by political friction, where Jewish families often lived under quiet, systemic pressure. When Anton was just 6 months old, they defected to the United States, carrying with them the remnants of a life they could no longer return to. The escape was not dramatic in appearance. Sirens, no chases, only a final performance in a foreign country high and a decision not to go back. But for his parents, it felt like stepping off a cliff. They landed in California exhausted, carrying a baby, a dream, and the fragile optimism of exiles. Language, money, roots, none of it came easily. But in their small apartment, Anton became their anchor to a future they hoped would be kinder. He was a quiet child, with large, observant eyes and a softness that made him seem almost translucent. According to people who knew him then, he had the kind of sensitivity that made adults pause and look twice, as if he were absorbing far more of the world than a child should. As he grew, America became his only home, but the shadows of displacement lingered in subtle ways. His parents worked tirelessly as skating coaches, and Anton wandered around ice rinks, listening to the cold scrape of blades against frozen floors. Perhaps it was here, watching the intense physical stories his parents carved with their bodies, that he first learned the language of emotion quietly, deeply, instinctively. He developed an early interest in performing. But unlike many child actors whose ambition is loud and theatrical, Anton's arrived as a whisper. He did not chase attention. He drifted toward it, pulled by a curiosity he couldn't name. His childhood roles came in sporadic appearances in television shows, compact roles in films where he played delicate, thoughtful boys touched by silence or sorrow. Casting directors often commented that he seemed older than his years, as if something ancient lived behind his eyes. But for all his gifts, the path was not smooth. He faced the same frustrations that plague the brutal competition, the stinging rejections, the long hours spent waiting to be dismissed after a 2-minute audition. And because his parents were immigrants rebuilding their lives from scratch, there was no safety net of wealth or influence beneath him. Those early teen years shaped him with a mixture of fragility and resilience. He read obsessively philosophy, literature, and obscure essays that most kids his age couldn't pronounce. He listened to music that felt older than him. He carried a camera everywhere, capturing textures, shadows, and the loneliness of empty streets after midnight. This wasn't a hobby, it was an inner language forming. He lived with a constant, quiet fear of failing the enormous sacrifices his parents had made. And so he pushed himself, sometimes to unhealthy extremes, filling his mind, stretching his emotions, studying not just acting, but humanity. Friends from his adolescence remember him as gentle but intense, sometimes so deep in thought that he seemed half absent. He rarely acted like a normal teen because he wasn't one. He carried too much awareness, too much curiosity, too much of a mind that spun beyond the moment. Yet the industry did not immediately embrace him. He walked into rooms, delivered lines, absorbed instructions, and left feeling invisible. Some casting agents later admitted they didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't glossy enough for teen heartthrob roles, not loud enough for comedic parts, not hardened enough for gritty drama. He was his own category, cerebral, emotionally intricate. Hollywood didn't have a neat box for that kind of talent yet. But talent like his only needs one moment. It arrived unexpectedly with a performance in 2007, at a time when he was nearly invisible to the mainstream. The role was small, but he played it with such quiet electricity that critics took notice. Suddenly, doors that once felt sealed began to crack open. Auditions turned into callbacks. Callbacks turned into offers. The pressure mounted, but alongside it came a trembling sense of possibility. He was still young, still unsure, still haunted by the feeling that he might not be enough. But the tide was shifting slowly, subtly, like the kind of wind that changes a whole season. The shift in Anton's life became unmistakable with the arrival of May 8, 2009, the release date of the Star Trek reboot that would propel him into the gravitational pull of global fame. Being cast as Pavel Chekhov was more than an acting opportunity. It was an inheritance of legacy, a role previously carried by Walter Koenig, a symbol for generations of sci-fi devotees. For Anton, the moment felt surreal. Behind the easy smile he wore during press tours, he confessed privately that he feared disappointing the millions who had already carved their own emotional histories with the character. But once the film premiered, audiences fell in love with his youthful awkwardness, his endearing accent, the spark of innocence he brought into a universe filled with war, ambition, and cosmic uncertainty. The success of Star Trek opened floodgates he had never imagined. He was suddenly requested, expected, and analyzed. Hollywood, once distant and indifferent, pulled him close. Interviews multiplied, scripts flooded in, red carpets stretched out before him like a labyrinth of light and questions. Yet, even as the world claimed him, he moved through that upward trajectory with the same mixture of awe and unease that had defined his youth. Fame for him was not a rush, it was a weight, a shifting terrain of expectations he wasn't sure he wanted to stand on. He was cast in roles that demanded emotional truth rather than glamour. In 2011, his performance in Like Crazy revealed a vulnerability so raw that critics described it as almost painful to watch. The film, shot with improvisational looseness, allowed Anton's instincts to rise to the surface. The hesitations, the tremors in his voice, the silent storms forming behind his eyes. Fans saw a young man capable of expressing heartbreak without theatrics, longing without melodrama. It was the kind of role that turned an actor into a soul you felt you knew. During these years, his personal life remained quiet, not because he was hiding anything sinister, but because he approached relationships the same way he approached art, carefully, intensely, sometimes fearfully. According to those close to him, he was both deeply affectionate and deeply private, often retreating into solitude for days. He struggled with the contradictions of being young, desirable, and introverted in an industry that demands charisma and constant connection. Rumors occasionally surfaced of brief romances, of quiet heartbreaks, of relationships that wilted under the pressure of his busy schedule. But nothing scandalous stuck to him. He lived gently, even when fame grew loud around him. Behind the scenes, however, the signs of strain began to appear. His insomnia worsened, leaving him wandering his home late at night, pacing floors littered with books, photographs, guitar strings, and handwritten notes for characters he felt responsible for honoring. His journals, later revealed in a documentary, held pages of restless introspection, questioning the purpose of his success, the fragility of life, and the strange loneliness fame had brought into his world. He often wrote about fears not of failure, but of time slipping through his fingers, of losing the authenticity that had shaped him. By May 17, 2013, with the release of Star Trek Into Darkness, his fame reached its peak. He attended premieres across continents wearing tailored suits that seemed almost too formal for his delicate frame. Camera flashes reflected off his skin like cold stars, and interviewers repeatedly asked about the pressure of carrying a global franchise. He would smile, laugh softly, and deflect with humility. But beneath the surface, his anxiety deepened. Stardom expanded his world, yet somehow narrowed his inner space. He sought refuge in creativity outside acting. Music became a sanctuary, a place where he could speak without dialogue. His home is filled with instruments, cables, and amplifiers. He wrote songs, sometimes recorded them, sometimes destroyed them in frustration. Photography became another escape. He carried his camera everywhere, capturing the fleeting poetry of mundane things. An abandoned chair, a half-lit street, a stranger staring at the sea. These images revealed a loneliness that words couldn't express, a gaze searching for meaning, connection, truth. In this period, he also returned to Russian literature, reading passages late into the night, drawn to the melancholy, existential weight that seemed to summarize his own inner turbulence. His friends would find him awake at dawn, barefoot, holding a book with unturned pages, lost in thoughts he rarely spoke aloud. Yet, despite the shadows that lingered around him, Anton never allowed them to eclipse his work. He continued accepting roles that challenged him. Green Room, released on April 15, 2016, became a testament to his bravery as an artist. The film was brutal, claustrophobic, and unflinching. He threw himself into it with a kind of emotional surrender that left him shaken long after filming ended. Critics praised his intensity. Audiences sensed the tragic beauty of a young actor on the verge of something profound. But life, in its cold indifference, had other plans. Because while Anton's career reached new heights, something ominous was quietly unfolding beneath the surface, a technical defect, buried in engineering reports and bureaucratic language, ticking like a hidden clock. His Jeep Grand Cherokee had been included in a recall announced on April 22, 2016, warning of a gearshift malfunction that could cause the vehicle to roll unexpectedly. Letters were sent to owners across the country. Repairs were scheduled. Most people didn't see the danger until it was too late. Anton never got his repair, and the countdown toward June 19, 2016 had already begun. There comes a moment in every tragic life story when the line between survival and surrender blurs into a painful, flickering haze where the world sees a star, but the star himself sees only shadows. For Chris Farley, that moment stretched across his final months like a slow-burning fuse, inching toward a tragic end everyone feared. But no one could stop. Chicago was cold that winter, sharp, metallic, and merciless. The kind of cold that scraped against the bones and echoed the loneliness inside him. His friends described those final weeks as a storm building in a man who had already been torn apart by too many storms. The laughter was still there, but only in flashes. Only when he needed it. Only when people expected it. And that was the cruel twist. The world demanded the tornado version of Chris Farley. Even when it was killing him, he had become a prisoner of his own persona. Every appearance he made, every handshake, every late-night show, every comedy room he walked into, someone always shouted the same line. Do the thing, do the Farley thing. They wanted the falling, the shouting, the wild energy. They wanted the man who destroyed tables on stage. They wanted the chaos. But the chaos wasn't a character. It was painful wearing a mask. Those closest to him always said Chris was the sweetest guy in any room. A man desperate to be loved, desperate to be accepted, desperate to be good enough. But the industry didn't see that version. That version didn't sell. And so the world kept pulling from him, even when he had nothing left to give. The pressure mounted. The roles became heavier. Hollywood wanted him for one thing, only loud, out-of-control comedy. But inside, Chris wanted something else, something quieter, something honest. He dreamed of dramatic roles. He wanted to play characters with depth, with darkness, with vulnerability. He wanted to show that he wasn't just a punchline, but every director, every executive, every script meeting circled back to the same demand. We need the Farley energy. It was the very trap John Belushi fell into before his death, yet Chris followed the same path, step by step, as if fate had written the script long before he ever arrived. His closest friends saw the exhaustion behind the laughter. They saw how he lingered after conversations, hoping someone would stay. They saw how fame had carved isolation into him. They watched him try again and again to sober up, and watched him fall again and again into the same familiar abyss. Rehab became a revolving door. He wanted to get clean. He begged to get clean. But addiction is a monster that feeds on loneliness. Chris Farley was lonelier than anyone realized. In early December 1997, he returned to Chicago homecoming that should have been grounding, but instead pushed him deeper into the shadows. He met old friends, visited old hangouts, chased old habits. The city held too many memories, too many versions of himself he could never escape. He tried to distract himself with work, with plans, with ideas for future projects, but his body was failing, his spirit weakening, and the weight of expectations was crushing him from all directions. And then came the night that sealed his fate. Accounts of that final evening paint a portrait of a man fighting his own ghosts. He wandered between clubs, friends, acquaintances, and strangers, searching for something, anything, that might numb the ache for just a little while. The same ache he had carried since childhood, the same ache he had tried to silence his entire life. By dawn, the world's brightest funny man had become a quiet, exhausted figure, walking through the empty streets of Chicago, breathing heavily, trembling, his voice strained and fading. People who saw him in those final hours described him with a word that breaks the heart: lost. Not reckless, not wild, not chaotic, just lost. And then, suddenly, the world lost him too. On December 18, 1997, the news broke. The kind no one wanted but everyone feared. Chris Farley, comedian, actor, tornado of laughter, gentle soul, was gone at just 33 years old. The parallels to John Belushi were haunting. Same age, same struggle, same ending. Almost the same city. It felt like history had repeated itself with cruel precision. Hollywood went silent. Late-night hosts, comedians, co-stars, directors, all of them united in a grief that felt strangely personal, as if the entire industry had failed him. And maybe it had. Maybe the machine that demanded endless laughter had ignored the man behind it. Friends cried openly in interviews. Some blamed the fame, some blamed the pressure, some blamed addiction. But the truth was more complicated. Chris Farley didn't die because he was reckless. He died because he was hurting. The world mourned the comedian. But those who loved him mourned the human being. His funeral in Madison, Wisconsin was somber, cold, and painfully quiet. A stark contrast to the chaos of his life. Snow fell gently over the mourners, almost as if the world itself was whispering an apology. David Spade didn't speak. He couldn't. The pain of losing yet another best friend was more than he could bear. Adam Sandler, stunned and broken, described Chris as the kindest, funniest, most caring hurricane of a person you'd ever meet. The SNL cast stood together, united by devastation. There is a moment from that day that people still talk about when Chris's father sat down after the burial, wiped his tears, and whispered something no parent should ever have to say. He just wanted everyone to love him. And maybe that was the tragedy all along. Chris Farley gave the world laughter, but his heart carried a silence no one heard until it was too late. After his death, something unexpected happened. The world began to see Chris Farley not just as a comedian, but as a symbol of how fragile even the brightest souls can be. Documentaries, interviews, books, and retrospectives painted a picture that had always been there, but hidden beneath the punchlines. Chris was a man of deep emotion, deep spirituality, and deep inner conflict. His co-stars confessed they had never known anyone with such pure love for making people happy. Critics revisited his performances. Millions rewatched his skits. New generations discovered him. His legacy grew, not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder. The loudest laughter often hides the deepest wounds. And perhaps the greatest irony in Chris Farley's story is this. He believed he wasn't good enough. He believed he wasn't lovable. He believed he was just the fat, funny guy. But the world remembers him as so much more. A comic genius, a cultural icon, a tragic star whose story continues to echo through Hollywood like a ghostly whisper. A symbol of the unseen battles so many entertainers fight behind closed doors. In the end, Chris Farley didn't leave behind a scandal or a crime or a mystery, but left behind a heartbreak. The heartbreak of a man who gave everything until he had nothing left. But legends like him never truly fade. Every time someone replays the Van Down by the River sketch, every time someone quotes Tommy Boy, every time someone wonders what dramatic roles he could have done, every time someone misses him without ever having met him, Chris Farley's spirit lives again. A beautiful, chaotic, flawed, gentle tornado, forever frozen in the glow of studio lights, forever laughing, forever loved. This is his legacy. This is his mystery. This is Chris Farley. Time has a strange way of reshaping the people we lose. It softens the edges, blurs the pain, and highlights the pieces that mattered most. For Chris Farley, the world's memory shifted gradually away from the chaos, away from the scandals, away from the tragic news cycles, and toward the legacy of a man who carried a rare, incandescent heart. In the years following his death, Hollywood entered a quieter period of reflection. The industry that once demanded his wildness suddenly found itself haunted by the absence of it. Studios rewatched his tapes, comedians revisited his sketches, directors analyzed his timing, and fans discovered a bittersweet truth. Chris Farley wasn't just funny, he was unforgettable. It began slowly, small tributes, subtle mentions, late-night references. But then came something bigger, something deeper. People who had worked with him started opening up, sharing stories that painted a portrait of Chris not as the loud, unpredictable performer the world thought they knew, but as a man who loved fiercely, cared deeply, and fought battles few ever saw. One writer from Saturday Night Live described him as a soul who wore his heart on the outside. Another said he was the kind of person who hugged you like he meant it, who listened like he didn't want the moment to end, who carried the weight of everyone's expectations even when he had no strength left to carry his own. But it wasn't just those who knew him personally. Audiences began to rediscover Farley through the digital age, through old clips resurfacing, documentaries being re-edited, podcasts dissecting his craft, and younger generations stumbling upon his movies as if uncovering a hidden treasure left behind by a previous era. Years after his death, the algorithm of the world brought Chris Farley back into the spotlight. Tommy Boy became a cult classic among new viewers. Beverly Hills Ninja found fresh life. Black Sheep earned newfound respect. And the SNL, the ones that defined a generation, were rediscovered by millions. Every clip felt like a time capsule. Every laugh felt like a ghost. Every chaotic movement felt like a heartbeat frozen in film. People didn't just see comedy, they saw passion. They saw the effort behind the madness. They saw the vulnerability in his eyes, even when he was screaming through a punchline. They saw a man trying so hard to be everything everyone wanted, even at the cost of his own peace. There were moments when fans wondered what roles Chris would have taken if he survived. What dramatic performances might he have delivered? What emotional depths were still hidden inside him? These questions created an entire subculture online, where people wrote essays, edits, and discussions imagining the alternate timeline where Chris Farley lived long enough to evolve beyond slapstick. Some said he could have been the next Robin Williams, man who started in comedy but later shattered hearts with dramatic brilliance. Others argued he could have taken on dark, psychologically heavy roles, surprising everyone with the depth he never got to show. A few imagined him directing, producing, mentoring young comedians, shaping the next generation with the empathy and love he was known for. They weren't unrealistic fantasies. Chris Farley had the talent for all of it. What he didn't have was time. But legacy doesn't need time to grow. Legacy only needs truth. And the truth about Chris Farley grew stronger with every passing year. At one point, an interview surfaced that he recorded when he was much younger, long before his fame. He spoke about wanting to bring joy to people because joy was something he struggled to find in himself. That clip went viral. Millions shared it. And suddenly, the world saw the boy inside the boy who never believed he was enough, who chased acceptance like oxygen, who tried to fill every room with laughter so he wouldn't have to sit alone with silence. That single clip changed everything. It became the heartbeat of his legacy. Meanwhile, Hollywood began to reevaluate itself. His death sparked conversations about mental health long before the topic became mainstream. Comedians spoke out about their own struggles with addiction, insecurity, pressure, and self-worth for the first time. And the world started to understand that comedy was not a bulletproof armor. In many cases, it was a wound disguised as entertainment. Chris's story became a mirror that the industry couldn't ignore. Over the next decade, 2 documentary teams attempted to tell his story. One focused on his career's sharp rise, the explosive fame, the unstoppable momentum. The other dug into the emotional tapestry hidden beneath, the noise childhood memories, insecurities, addictions, spiritual battles, and the devastating cycle of recovery and relapse. Both documentaries painted the same picture from different angles. Chris Farley was not a tragedy. He was a man fighting to survive a life too big for his heart. His family remained protective of him, guarding his memory with quiet dignity. His brothers spoke with a mixture of affection and sorrow whenever they mentioned him, describing a man who was both deeply loved and deeply troubled. His mother rarely gave interviews, but when she did, she always emphasized one thing: he wanted to make people happy. And that, more than anything else, became the cornerstone of his legacy. Fans created tribute pages and memorials. Artists painted murals of him in Chicago and New York. Film students studied his comedic timing as if analyzing the technique of a master painter. And his old SNL castmates, most of them now older, wiser, and carrying their own emotional scars, often said that Farley's absence remained one of the greatest losses in their professional and personal lives. Adam Sandler paid tribute to him in a song decades later, woven so raw, so personal, that audiences around the world cried with him. It wasn't a performance, it was grief that never healed. And the more time passed, the clearer Farley's place in history became. He wasn't just part of the comedy world, was a pillar of it. His name became synonymous with a specific kind of brilliance, reckless yet delicate, chaotic yet calculated, loud yet heartbreakingly gentle. There was a moment, years after his passing, when a film critic wrote something that resonated globally. Chris Farley didn't just make people laugh, he made people feel something. And that was the truth. It was why he endured. Why do his clips still go viral? Why his name still trends? Why the world still speaks of him with both joy and ache? But perhaps the most powerful part of his legacy is hidden in the lives he touched without ever knowing it. Countless people have said that Chris Farley carried their childhood, that he was their comfort in dark times. His movies helped them survive loneliness, depression, heartbreak, and difficult nights. That his laughter lifted them in ways they could never explain. Farley's tragedy was that he couldn't see the love he gave the world, but the world never forgot him. In the end, the story of Chris Farley didn't conclude with the tragedy of his death. It continued in the millions of moments where someone somewhere pressed play on an old clip and felt their heart lighten. It lived in the comedians who cited him as inspiration. It lived in the fans who spoke his name with warmth. It lived in the archives of SNL, where his legacy still roars like a hurricane. And so, the final chapter of Chris Farley's life isn't about darkness. It isn't about addiction. It isn't about loss. It's about a man whose laughter outlived the pain that created it. A soul who burned too brightly, too quickly, yet left a glow that refuses to fade. A legend who showed the world that even the most chaotic storm can carry beauty. A mystery, not because of how he died, but because of how deeply he was loved. Chris Farley remains forever young, forever wild, forever loved, forever echoing in the halls of comedy as a reminder that some stars burn not to be admired, but to light the way for others. This is his final chapter. This is his legacy.